Bhagavan in 1944, he was on a major pilgrimage to find someone who could show him God. This was an ecstatic, visionary Bhakta who had fallen in love with Krishna as a 7-year-old boy. Throughout his life, Krishna had been appearing to him, but he couldn't control how often Krishna would come. When Krishna came, he would be very ecstatic, and when Krishna went away, he'd be a little bit depressed. He'd lost the darshan of the form. So what he was looking for was someone who had the capacity to enable him to see Krishna all the time. Bhagavan himself had manifested outside Papaji's house in the Punjab a few weeks before in the form of a sadhu. And Papaji had asked his usual question, "Do you know anybody who can show me God?" And this sadhu had said, "Go to Tiruvannamalai, go and see this man Ramana MAHARSHI, maybe he can help you." So Papaji took down directions, took a job in South India so he could have access to Tiruvannamalai, came a couple of weeks early so he could meet Bhagavan before he started work, and then he arrived, and you can imagine him being somewhat disgusted when he sees sitting on the sofa the same man who had knocked on his door up in the Punjab a few weeks before. He thought, this man's cheating me, he's just drumming up business for himself. If he really could show me God, he could have done it in the Punjab. Why did he make me run down here? So all these thoughts were going through his head, and he was actually loading up his bags back on the cart which had brought him from the train station. He said, "I'm not even going in to see this man." Then an old devotee called Framji, he said, what are you up to? You've only just arrived. Why are you leaving? So he told this story of how this sadhu had banged on his door and sent him to Tiruvannamalai, and he said, then this man rushed ahead of me, jumped on this sofa, now he's in there waiting for me to come in. And Framji said, no, ask anybody in this ashram, he hasn't left town for 50 years, close to 50 years. So Papaji thought, well, something interesting going on here, I'll at least go in and find out what's happening. So he went in, and out of the usual time, Bhagavan rested from 12 till 2, and he just walked in not knowing this. The attendant tried to shoo him out, but Bhagavan could see that this was a man who was on fire for God, so he waived the usual rules, let him in, and Papaji said, "Are you the man who knocked on my door in the Punjab a month ago?" And Bhagavan just kept quiet. He never got an answer on that one. And then Papaji said, "Can you show me God?" And Bhagavan said, "God is not an object that can be seen. God is the seer." So this for a Krishna Bhakta was a very unsatisfactory answer. What Bhagavan was saying was, don't waste your time looking for phenomena which you can perceive, because you yourself are the God that you want to look for. Now Papaji said, I would have just dismissed him as just another in a long string of fake swamis who'd given me bad advice in the previous year or two, except, he said, in that moment when he said, you yourself are God, God is the seer, he said, I actually had an experience of what he was talking about. There was a power in that statement, there was a power in that presence that enabled Papaji to have this experience of the heart, to have an experience of going back into the heart and experiencing firsthand what Bhagavan was telling him. However, his Krishna conditioning was still quite severe. He wasn't willing to give up his addiction to the form, so he didn't bother to stay in the ashram. He went off to somewhere near Adinamalai, that's on the other side of the hill. He said he found a nice little place where, he said, I meditated for close to 2 weeks on Krishna. Krishna appeared, I played on the mountain with him, we had lots of fun, we had a great time together. And then I thought, it's time to go back to Chennai, Madras in those days, I've got this job to do. But I'll just say goodbye to that nice old man on the sofa. He gave me a very good experience. Plus, he was feeling in a very boastful mood. He thought, I know for a fact that I've been seeing Krishna for 2 weeks. I bet that man on the sofa hasn't seen him once. I'm going to go in and kind of boast that I've been seeing Krishna every day for 2 weeks, say goodbye, and then I'll go off to my job in Madras. So he comes in again, and Bhagavan's obviously, been thinking about him, wondering what happened. And Papaji very boastfully says, he said, "Where have you been? I haven't seen you." And Papaji said, "I've been on the other side of the hill playing with Krishna." And Bhagavan feigned, surprised interest. "Oh," he said, really, do you see him now?" And Papaji said, "No, sir, I do not." And then Bhagavan said, "A God that appears and disappears is not the real God." And that kind of annoyed Papaji even more. He'd come there looking to show off, coming to tell Bhagavan that he'd been playing and dancing with Krishna, and Bhagavan didn't even value his experience. He said, if you are attached to phenomena, even if those phenomena are visions of gods, then you're not actually seeing God, because if a vision appears and disappears, that vision cannot possibly be God, because God is the permanent underlying substratum of all that exists. Until you become established with that substratum, you're not knowing God as he really is. I asked him about this. I said, you've always told me that if you have faith in your Guru's words, then they will immediately work. They'll work very efficiently. You went to Ramanashram as a Krishna Bhakta. He gave you correct answers, but they weren't answers that satisfied you. They didn't increase your faith in him. In fact, you felt he was talking nonsense, even though he gave you a good experience. So how did you generate the faith in his words that caused you to actually experience what those words were talking about? And then he said, "Oh yes, I forgot to mention that there was another trip." He said, "I went back a few weeks later, and I sat in front of him, and a group of pilgrims had just come from Tirupati, which is a big pilgrimage center a few hours north of here, and they had taken was it a statue or a photo of Krishna? I can't remember. So they gave it to Bhagavan to be blessed. He said they were Krishna Bhaktas themselves, and they were just going home to wherever their village was, and they stopped off to see Bhagavan to have their picture or their statue blessed. And he said, if you've spent your whole life meditating on Krishna, if you're in love with Krishna, if you've seen Krishna, if Krishna has danced and played with you, then you're in a state where you can recognize Krishna Bhakta in somebody else. And he said, I looked at Bhagavan, looking at this picture, and I tuned into his state, and he said, I saw this was a man who was 100% Bhakta. He was absolutely in love with Krishna. He was in love with all gods, of course, but he said, as I saw him look at this image of Krishna, he said, I felt a wave of Krishna Bhakti in me, coming from him, that I'd never felt as strongly from anybody else. And I thought to myself, this is a secret Krishna Bhakta. He's hiding behind this Advaita philosophy, but he can't hide it anymore. Somebody has shown him a picture of Krishna, and now he's revealed to me that he really is a true Krishna Bhakta. So he told me that this was when his faith in what Bhagavan was saying became more of a tangible reality. He had faith that this was a true jnani, that he was a true Bhakta, that he was a closet Krishna Bhakta, even though he wasn't admitting it to anybody else. So he said, on that trip I didn't talk to him. I went back to Chennai, carried on with my life, but he said I still was attached to this whole business of seeing Krishna. Bhagavan hadn't converted me to his notion that I should find out who it is who is seeing God and abide there. I still wanted to see the gods. That was my addiction, that was my compulsion. My whole life revolved around seeing God. He said, after I went back, I intensified my sadhana. It was already incredibly intense to begin with. He said, I used to get up at 2 a.m. every morning and chant a long Krishna mantra 50,000 times. He said, I started just chanting, and then I synchronized it with my breath, and I thought, I must do one repetition of this mantra for every breath I've had in my entire life. I've wasted so many decades of breaths without using those breaths to utter the holy name. I must make up for all those neglected breaths. So he calculated how many breaths he'd had in his life and how many repetitions of this mantra he had to get through in order to catch up on all the wasted breaths. He said, that was my whole life. I was absolutely, completely absorbed in the name of Krishna, in this mantra that contained his name. I locked myself in my puja room all day. My whole being was totally absorbed in this Krishna mantra. He said, then one morning, middle of the night, there was a knock on the door. And of course, who is it? So his first thought was, well, it can't be my wife because I've told her not to disturb me in the puja room. It must be some of my relatives come from the Punjab without telling me. The train arrives at very erratic times. They must have arrived on a late train. They've come to see me. So he opened the door, and much to his surprise and amazement, outside were Rama, Sita, Hanuman and Lakshman standing on his front doorstep. So he said, well, first of all, I was shocked that the gods had come to see me in the middle of the night. But my second reaction was, have they knocked on the wrong door? These are not my gods. my God is Krishna. What are they doing banging on my door in the middle of the night? So he invited them in and sat them down. And then he went rushing through his house to wake up his wife, saying, quick, Rama, Sita, Lakshman and Hanuman have come to visit. Make them some tea. We've got to entertain them. And his wife, of course, was saying, you're mad, go back to bed. No, come and look. So against her better judgment, she came and had a look, and of course she couldn't see them. So she got annoyed with him and went back to sleep. So there was Papaji with the gods in his puja room, and Hanuman finally explained. He said, I've been watching you do all this devotional japa. I went off to tell Rama that I'd found this incredibly ardent, passionate devotee, and I invited him down here to see you and to talk to you, because I was so impressed with your devotion. I thought Rama should come and have a look as well. So Papaji said that they just sat and looked at each other for what he thought was a few minutes. He said I was very ecstatic, very blissful. And then there was a bang, bang, bang on the door. It was his wife again saying, get up, get out of the house, you're late for work. And he realized he'd spent the whole night in silent bliss with these gods who'd visited. And so he got up, went off to work, didn't tell anybody at work what had happened. And he said this visitation, this meeting, stopped his ability to repeat his mantra. And he said this, for someone who was such an ardent, passionate Krishna Bhakta, this was a great disaster. He said, I could no longer think about Krishna, I couldn't repeat his name, and I felt I'd slid down from my high state, that I was failing in my practice, so I was very worried. He said, I went all over Chennai talking to all the big swamis I could find, Ramakrishna Mission people, people who were quite famous at the time, and they all said, dark night of the soul, don't give up, keep trying. He said they had standard pat book answers they'd read in their books. This is what you do when you find your devotion slacking off. So they gave standard book answers. He said none of these people had a direct experience, so they couldn't look at my state, evaluate my state and give me a proper answer. And then I thought, there's one person in the world who can tell me what's really going on. It's that Swami in Tiruvannamalai. I had a great experience with him. He was a big Krishna Bhakta. I'll go and tell my story to him, and then he can give me good advice. So the next weekend he got on the train, got to Tiruvannamalai, came by a cart to the ashram. Again, it was lunchtime, and the attendant tried to shoo him out, and Bhagavan said, no, let him in. He could see that this man was burning in a way for God. And Papaji told the whole story, and Bhagavan said, how did you get here today? And Papaji said, well, I came on the train. And then he said, and what happened when you got off the train? And Papaji said, I got into a bullock cart, came to the ashram. And then what happened? He said, well, I got off the bullock cart, walked in here and prostrated. And then Bhagavan paused for a while, and he said, in the same way that those conveyances took you to your destination, and here you are presenting yourself to me, your japa took you to your destination, you have arrived, you have arrived, you have arrived.